Hello, everybody. Welcome to Kundalini Hour with Shanti, me, Alan Steinfeld, Tim Rustow, and our wonderful guest this evening is Tom Thompson. And I'm going to read Tom's bio. Tom Thompson is a teacher of conscious living. Conscious living is an all-inclusive way of life. It is based on the enlightenment pathways of the East and the human potential teachings of the West. It includes the possibility of radical awakening, along with the integration of body, emotions, mind, and spirit, living skillfully and effectively in this world, and being in loving, empowering relationships. The teachings of conscious living are direct, obvious, and all-inclusive. There is nothing to be believed or accepted as they are self-evident. They point to the incredible gift and mystery of life, living us here and now as we are. In 1964, at the age of 15, Tom became a student of human psychology and a practitioner of the yogic pathways and enlightenment traditions. He has had the great fortune of training in depth with a number of exceptional teachers in both the enlightenment traditions and Western psychology. In 1982, Tom co-founded the Woodbury Yoga Center in Connecticut, where he created and taught in-depth courses on meditation, Kundalini, the yoga of death and dying, the supreme doctrine, the Hara training, and other subjects. In 1990, he co-founded the Awakened Heart Center for Conscious Living in North Carolina, where he continued to offer various courses and intensives focusing on the direct path to spiritual awakening. And in 2017, Tom began offering satsang and hamsa meditation at the Yoga Garden in Pittsboro, North Carolina. At this time, he offers satsang via Zoom every Sunday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Welcome, Tom.
Oh, thank you. That was very nice. You did that very well.
Thank you. I'm going to tell my little story about Tom. So I read, because in my lineage of my guru were both Dhyan Yogi and Baba Muktananda. And I read this book, This House is on Fire by Anandima, about Dhyan Yogi Madhusiddhanta. So I saw Tom's name in this book. And so I remembered his name. It's kind of a name that you remember, Tom Thompson.
It's got two ohms in it.
I didn't even consider that. Yes, it does. So later, when Alan and Tim and I were talking about doing some sort of a thing on Kundalini, and we were thinking about people, and that was a couple years ago, Tim said, there's this guy that has this place called the Awakened Heart Center, Tom Thompson. And so I made that connection. So I've always wanted to sit and have a conversation with you, Tom, because I'm really intrigued by your background, that you spent time with two of the gurus that were very influential in my lineage, and also what it's evolved into now for you. I spent a lot of time today on your website reading your blogs about Kundalini. So that was fun. I recommend that to anyone. They're very informative. And there is a link to his website in the description below. So welcome, and Alan, you're muted.
Reminding me. Thank you. Now I can speak. No, I'm always interested in how someone gets on the path, what they find in the path, and suddenly they've arrived somewhere. Something emerges. I mean, that's sort of, I don't know if Tim has an initial question, but I like to aim where people are at and hear a little bit of their story. I know it's a story, but that's what we got here.
Especially at age 15.
So,
well, that story, interestingly enough, sort of happened in North Carolina, even though I was living in New York. We were on a college tour for my brother, and I couldn't even drive yet. And we were looking at North Carolina schools, and we stopped at my aunt's house in Lumberton. And I'd been very involved in science. My goal at that point was to discover the cure for cancer. So I was doing research, plant cancer research, had bacteria, viruses, everything. Had a lab at my home, and I was very interested in finding the key to life, because cancer is life out of control. And so we were at my aunt's place in Lumberton, North Carolina, and I found a book on yoga. And the person who wrote the book used, I can't, it's been so long, but basically in science, you study the science, but you don't believe what you study. You go into the laboratory and you prove it through experimentation. And this book on yoga was saying the same thing, is you don't rely on philosophy or religion. You actually have ways of validating these things yourself through the yogic and meditative practices. And that was the first time I heard the word Kundalini. And the way this yogi described it, it seemed like it was the key. As it turns out, he's right. and so I was just fascinated, and it was very hard to get information. A lot of it was like Arthur Avalon's Serpent Power. It was very, difficult to understand. But over time, I ran into Gopi Krishna's writings. I took training at the Shivananda ashrams, which Swami Shivananda was a medical doctor, but he wrote lots of books, and one of them was Kundalini. But that was more, it seems like most of us are in a surrender type modality with Kundalini, but he gave very precise practices and things. And then when I went to the Shivananda ashram, I trained in those methods and techniques of Swami Vishnu. And it's hard to tell, because I feel that if like anybody watching this show right now, I feel their Kundalini's awake. Anybody who's authentically on a spiritual path, I feel their Kundalini's awake. It's Kundalini that makes us question and look more deeply. That's its awakening, and it will ultimately be the inner guru and guide us. But it's a long story. I won't go into it all, but I've been studying Zen and everything. And when I came back to the East Coast from California, I heard about Muktananda. I'd actually seen him in a dream and became very interested. Started taking the Siddha yoga lessons that Swami Guru Premananda was writing. And I was living with my friends in a small cottage at Lake Hayward Club in Connecticut. And I used to do very, very masculine, very, very samurai type Zen, sit very strong, Zazen. And the mantra was offered Hamsa. And so I started doing this mantra. This is around 1974, September. And I started feeling stuff really happening. And the first thing that happened is I thought I died. I felt like I turned into a dried up leaf. And what I now know is all the prana was consolidating. And I thought I was dying. My consciousness was leaving. My body was so weak, I was stopping breathing. And I just fell over. And then the next thing I know is the Kundalini shot up. And I went into this just, you can't say I was there. There was just pure light of consciousness. And I don't know how long I stayed in that state, but when I came back, my body was overwhelmed and it scared the hell out of me. So next day I went back to Zazen. But that didn't last too long. I was intrigued, and then I started finding out more and more about Muktananda, and then he came to the East Coast in '76, and I went and started spending as much time with him as I could.
So did you know that was a product of being with him or saying that mantra of his?
Yeah, I could feel that the mantra, and it's called Chaitanya, it's alive, and I could feel that mantra being alive. And it took over my system. I can talk about what happened now but it took over my system, and it went and awakened or unfolded Kundalini. very, very powerful.
What was the actual mantra? Can you give us, do you want to share the actual mantra?
It's Hong Saw. And on the website, there's a whole
Yeah.
link to the Hong Saw Kundalini, but it's called Hum Saw. But Hong Saw, later Baba told me it's the whole path from beginning to end, because Hong is that pure I am consciousness. The pure I am consciousness expresses as everything. That's the Shakti. Saw is Shakti. Saw is the entirety of existence. It's life. It's us. And so Hong Saw is both Shiva and Shakti. They're not two different things. They're the same thing. And so that's later on he asked me to teach it to people, and he talked a lot about how it's the whole path. 2 syllables, everything you need to know.
So he wasn't giving out the Om Namah Shivaya or Shivoham?
No, he was giving out, in the early days, Guru Om, and then he was giving out Om Namah Shivaya. But he was also, and the only book he's ever written was, I should have brought it in here, is on Hamsa, on the Hamsa mantra, I am that. But that was a mantra he very much emphasized. So Hamsa balances the currents of prana and opens up the Sushumna. And it's a Shaktipan mantra.
Do you feel it's also a balancing mantra for people who already have like had a spontaneous awakening, that it would be kind of something to do to balance?
Yeah, so there are 2 currents of the sun and moon energies, and with most people, they're out of balance one way or the other. And in each specific chakra, they can be out of balance. And what Hongsa does is integrate them. The Sushumna is like the integration of the sun and moon currents. And so it can be very useful for balancing.
And you do hum on the out breath and saw on the in breath?
No, Hong, and this Hong goes up the Sushumna to the pure I am, and then Saw, as the breath goes out, is creating the entire universe. So the exhalation Saw is breathing the universe out. Everything is that. So there's a Kriya where you breathe it up into the 3rd ventricle from the sacrum, Hong, and then as you exhale, Saw. So Hong is the ascending current, and Saw is the descending current.
You're putting me into
that guy over your left shoulder, Babaji. Babaji used to teach this.
Oh, is it? Okay. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
But you got it from Muktananda.
Yeah. And it was deepened from some other yogi.
Right. No, I was just saying, Tim said you were putting him in a trance just by doing the mantra.
You know, it's so funny. It's like I can see in Tom when he's talking about the mantra. It's not like an intellectual discussion. I can actually see and feel his experience and the Shakti in his description. So when he's describing Hangsha, it's like a Shaktipat. It's a Shaktipat mantra, his experience with Shaktipat, and he's delivering the Shaktipat all at the same time. It's really beautiful.
It is beautiful. So what happened next?
Well, it was very interesting because I was working on a psychiatric unit, and that was interesting. And I had a wife and a baby, and all sorts of Kundalini phenomena going on, which, again, as Tim was just saying, when you read about it in a book, it's or like Autobiography of a Yogi or Baba's autobiography, The Play of Content, sounds great. But when it's actually happening to you, as you all know, and you have to function in day-to-day life, and you have a baby and a wife, and you got to go to work and act sane, it can be very stressful. And so I was having all sorts of experiences, issues, and yet still had a function. And it was very, at that point, difficult. But at the same time, at a certain point, both Muktananda was in New York, and then when he went back to India, Sri Dhyan Yogi was with me. He came, and I would be taking some of the patients, but mostly staff members, doctors, whoever wanted to come to meet the gurus. And that was very interesting. And the head of psychiatry, Dr. Custer, he gave me permission. He was held in such high esteem that he gave me permission to teach meditation to the appropriate patients and staff.
Wow.
And since nobody ever questioned him because he was held in such high esteem, they figured it was okay with him. That was it. So even when there were other chiefs of unit, they just let it keep going because they knew Gordon, and if he gave the okay, it was good enough. So it was a really intense time. And how I met Guruji, Sri Dhyan Yogi, was Muktananda went back to India. He had a heart attack. I couldn't connect with him directly. I couldn't go to India because, again, I had a wife and a baby and a job. And I was writing Lee Sanella, who was a psychiatrist and an ophthalmologist. And Lee wrote one of the first books on Kundalini to be understood by Western science and doctors. And Lee was very generous with his time.
What's the name of that book, Tom?
Back then it was Kundalini, Transcendence or Psychosis. And it's been republished, and now I don't know the name of it now, but it's by Dr. Lee Sanella. And he was the founder of the Kundalini clinic out there. I think it was in San Francisco. So Lee told me about Sri Dhyan Yogi, and I tracked him down, and then I wrote him this letter saying, would you come see me? Mm-hmm. And I thought that was so arrogant. It was so audacious because I'm sure he had something better to do. But I put it in the mailbox, and as soon as I did that, I tried to figure out how to get it out. It's like, I shouldn't have done that. And a few days later, I got a letter from him saying, yeah, I'll come see you. And so it's like, awesome. What do I do now? So fortunately, my mother was off somewhere. So he first came to her house. She wasn't there. And we started having satsang in the house. And he met my daughter. And out of that visit, eventually a center started in Woodbury, Connecticut, which is still there today. And Nandi Ma still goes there. And Guruji would come and spend time with us on a regular basis.
So Nandi Ma is Dhyan Yogi's successor,
right?
Who's still giving Shaktipat.
Yeah, she's in California.
How did what was the practice or non-practice or focus for Dhyan Yogi and for Sri Ma?
Well, of course, he had a formalized Shaktipat process, more formal than Muktananda's. And then for people who were sincere, he had the Vajra Panjar trainings, which were 3, I guess they were about week-long retreats where he would train people in all these mantras, methods, techniques. His lineage is the Ram lineage that goes back to Yogi Vashishta. So it'd be the 3 Vajrapanjar trainings and then Vajrapanjar applied. So people would learn the Hanuman Chalisa, the Rama Raksha Stotram, different mudras, learn how to sun gaze. I can't remember how to do that mudra anymore, but to absorb energy directly from the sun. So Guruji was an old yogi. He wasn't a modern yogi. He came from the 1800s. He couldn't even speak English when I first met him. So this old guy who was about 100 years old picked up English in 1 year. It was just amazing to see his ability. You know, let's hope when we're all 100, we can.
He lived till, was he 118 or something?
116, yeah.
116.
So we went to India twice to see him after he couldn't come back to the United States.
What was his Shakti like? Because, you know, we know the stories of Muktananda, at least most people watching the show, people are kind of sent into a cosmic transcendental state, or like, you know, everything falls away quickly, but etc. Like in my experience, the Shaktipat of the Guru has like a different, everyone has a different flavor, similar, but unique. And so I'm wondering, you know, with your wealth of exposure, yeah, for Dhyan Yogi and for Sri Ma, what was the quality of the Shakti that they were having flow through them?
I think with Muktananda, there was no doubt initially something was happening. It was like a wall. You know, you were hit by this wave of Shakti. With Guruji, it could be more subtle. And some people, they might go home and think nothing happened. It might go days, and then they'd start realizing lots happening. So Guruji's could be more subtle, and it could be more psychic. People might have more psychic. They may not feel energy as much, but they'd start having psychic phenomena. One of my favorite stories, and this was with Sri Anandima, was this young man who was becoming a state policeman in Connecticut. He became a state policeman, but he took Shaktipat with Anandima. And after Shaktipat, we'd have everybody come down and we'd feed them food to ground and to help them come back. Mm-hmm. So this young man sat down and he didn't talk for the longest time. And we were, you know, watching him to make sure he came back. And finally he looked up and looked at us and he goes, "Why doesn't everybody do this?"
I've asked that question before.
I just asked the same question to my partner yesterday. Like, I can't believe everyone doesn't do this.
And both his aunt and his mother came. They were older women, but they were always there.
Whose mother?
This young guy who became a cop.
That young. Right. Well, I think that's why we're trying to do this program, or we're doing this program, because we want everyone to understand first this is possible, right? I mean, you know, there's so many people, but yet it's so sporadic. It's like, you know, if you didn't have a community and you had these experiences, you might think you were going crazy. But it's happening more and more now. So providing this community where people can talk about this is how everyone's going to do it, I think.
Yeah, and right. Next week you have Bonnie Greenwell, who I'm a great fan of hers, and her books are really, really, everybody involved as a teacher in Kundalini should have her books, in my opinion, and students too, because she's got she's a psychotherapist, but vast experience, and her books are very, very useful.
I just started reading her Kundalini guide, and I was asking myself the question, why have I not come across her so much sooner than now? Because yes, vast is the word that comes to me, vast knowledge.
Yeah, her first book, I think she got her doctorate for Energies of Transformation, which is a little more, you know, a lot more stories. But yeah, and then she has a new book, When the Spirit Leaps. Mm-hmm. But I think, you know, having worked in psychiatry, we have a very rigid view of reality. And people get frightened when they start having, you know, the walls start separating. They start having experiences that aren't considered or aren't talked about or even acknowledged. And they need support, that it's okay.
They do.
And you're available for that, right, Tom? You are.
Yeah. Yes. I have people work with me individually, but we have satsang. I think probably some of the people come to satsang. I don't know if you can tell if people are watching this, but some of them are going to watch. Um,
I can look at my live stream, my live feed.
I usually,
You know, yeah. Go ahead.
Go
What were
ahead,
you saying?
Alan.
You usually what? You know.
Alan.
Oh
we
no,
have,
what were you gonna say? You usually
at satsang, I try to get people to share in group, because even though they may think it's unique to themselves, it's usually something everybody's experiencing or going to experience. So to be able to talk about it in the group is useful, because um, it helps others understand the big picture. And one guy was really having phenomenal.
no.
He had divine sound. He never knew this stuff was happening. This profound. He would just become absorbed in this river of beautiful divine sound. He had no reference for that. And after I convinced him he wasn't crazy, he would then willingly, openly talk about it with the group. And he'd look at me like, yeah, should I stop now?
Right, and then you can embrace that and
I was-
expand further and further into that experience rather than shrinking away from it and having fear
Right.
about it.
Right.
That's actually an interesting.
I was gonna ask if you can talk about the progression of the Kundalini. You know, everyone gets boom. It's like explosion, and then but you've been at this for since the 70s. So, I mean, it's in that process of maturing with the Shakti. I mean, can you call on it and have it like heightened, or does it really settle in and become an aspect of everything?
That's it. It's everything. And it's, when we talk about it, it sounds dualistic, and it's okay to be dualistic, because it's all inclusive, includes everything. But everything is the Shakti. And it communicates with each person in its own unique fashion, as like intuition or whatever. You can feel, but it's everything. So there's no getting away from it. And yes, they're without a doubt unique experiences and things like that, but everything is it. And it's just, you start living in a state of astonishment.
Yes, I love the state of astonishment. Can you explain the state of astonishment?
We go into a trance at a certain point, and we think we know what's going on, and we have expectations, and we think, we're in a trance. We're living in a box. And the Kundalini can either very gently dissolve that, or she can blow it apart, or both, as usually happens. But you start seeing that you really have no freaking idea what's going on. and it's, you're not in a trance, and so everything is so fresh and so new and unpredictable. And for many people, this is, it creates some anxiety initially, but it's just an amazing grace, everything happening. It's just unfolding. And so you live in astonishment. It's like, I responded to something Tim posted, and you saw it and connected with me. And I see all that is the Shakti.
Yes.
And we don't have to do anything. It's just doing it.
Can you elaborate on that point a little about doership?
Yeah, I think one of the main breakthroughs I had, and it seems silly, is when Wayne Lickerman was at our center in 2001, I had a very deep awakening in the realization that I, as Tom, what most people perceive as Tom, am not authoring my life. And what is authoring is the Kundalini. It's authoring everything. There's nothing outside of it. And so you become like a little child. I think Jesus said, until you become like a little child, you won't enter the kingdom. And it's a surrender. And I've heard everybody talk about that. You're opening and surrendering in the moment. It's a deep faith in this moment as it is. And there's something that guides you towards something or makes you hesitant. You can feel what to do. It's like eating, even the Shakti tells you what to eat and what not to eat.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be different every day.
So just so I understand and to elaborate on this, I think it's a good one. So there's still, like, I would say for my process, there is a Tim who is able to intuit what the Shakti guides him to do. But of course, at another level, it's the Shakti guiding the Shakti. Be that as it may, I still feel like I can follow this intuition towards more expansion, or I can ignore that intuition and inevitably there'll be a more contracting experience. But
that's the Shakti.
But I appear to have a choice about whether I want to eat what she wants me to eat or whether I eat what I want to eat. And if I eat what I want to eat, I'm in sick in bed for all night. And if I eat what she, or doesn't, I don't eat when she doesn't want me to eat, then inevitably I feel great. But I seem to have some free will or doership to make a choice on the intuited path. How do you reconcile that?
So let's say you feel the Shakti says you shouldn't eat ice cream, but you want to eat ice cream. But she created the ice cream, she created that desire, she created the compulsion, she created the program. So even though this is the thing, you can't get out of it. Even though you think the Shakti wants me not to eat ice cream, I'm going to eat ice cream, it's still the same thing. You can't lose. You can't lose. Does that make sense?
But there's a voice.
I have that message from her as well. She literally said, like, you cannot mess up.
Right.
You cannot blow this. Like, don't worry.
That's correct. Wayne Lickerman said, you cannot do this wrong.
Go ahead, Alan.
But Tim is saying there's an easy path or there's the hard path. Do you want to take the easy road without the bumps, or you want to take the hard road that's full of twists and turns and ditches? That's the choice in a way, right? I mean,
yeah, that's what it seems like to me. Like, if I use my willpower or my determination or likes, dislikes coming from a more personality complex place, like I want what I want, when I want, how I want, I have it, but the experience itself is usually so contracting that I don't want to repeat that. And over time, just like a real mother, she's training you to be her, basically. So she's constantly guiding you to become one with her. And the choices you make, which are more contracting, in my feeling, seem to make it harder, or even maybe slow down the process if you want to look at time space, but maybe not. But there's definitely one that's more pleasant. And so she guides you towards that all the time.
But also, who created the Tim character? And so even that's I think part of the non-judgmental is when you see, like, if you teach meditation, most people are never going to practice it. And so you can get judgmental and say, well, they're lazy or they don't get it or whatever. But that's her. It's like a play. Everybody's playing. It's like Hamlet. Everybody's playing their character perfectly. And so those who, drink beer and watch Netflix instead of meditating, that's her.
Mhm. So what's the purpose of the personality then? I mean, if all paths lead to the great mother, the, the, like the choice Tim was saying, has a purpose, I feel, to for something to train us, to get out of the way, to get the ego. And, you know, yeah, the ego's a path too, of course, but there seems to be like a reason for it, or am I just made up?
But I think it depends again if one of the things Muktananda talked about is the play of consciousness, and we're all characters, and what you need in a play to make it interesting is diversity. And for whatever reasons, some of us want are driven to awaken. So Kundalini has the descending force where she's putting us into trance, into limitation, into limiting identity. She's creating that. So what were you? You were an investment banker, Tim, or something?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, I mean that's a great trance. And you know, you to really do that well, you have to believe all sorts of things and get highly motivated and highly invested. And so she's that descending force, and then we're in that, and some people find tremendous satisfaction. But others, even like Steve Jobs, who was into Yogananda and Zen stuff, you start going, well, what's going on? And that's when people start the spiritual search. That's when I think the Kundalini begins awakening. That,
With
you
the
know, if
question
people
of,
are even listening to us right now, they're listening to us because their Kundalini's awakening. They're wakening up out of the limiting trances.
yeah,
But
I
she
don't.
puts us in those trances in the first place.
Mhm.
Would you say, like, just keying off of Alan's question and reading a little bit myself of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother the last couple of weeks? Is there, and some people talk about this, that there's an evolutionary aspect to the Kundalini, that it's, if Alan's reason would be more like in Sri Aurobindo's schematic, it's like a new human being is being birthed, or that it does seem to be more prevalent now, Kundalini awakening. It's, we could say it's this the cyclical yuga, or it could be that there's this evolutionary aspect going on. And if you listen to New Age people, they definitely believe there's ascension or new humanity, new Earth going on. What's your take on that?
First is I don't know, and second is I've had visions of it happening. I think humans are rapidly evolving. There is very good scientific evidence that people who meditate regularly literally are evolving their brains. Their brains are different than other people, and they're functioning differently. The limbic system is getting weaker and smaller. More cognitive functioning, the more integration, the more gamma waves. So even in a very short amount of time, PET scans show that people who meditate are evolving. Their own physical body is gaining capacities it didn't once have, and that other people don't have. And I do think the human race is evolving. We're upright creatures. There's all sorts of speculation why mostly humans have that ascending Kundalini. That's why we're upright creatures. Our brain doubled in size in a very short time. And we're evolving now. I mean, you're in Bali, Tim?
Yes.
And yeah, I mean, we're all sitting here talking like this is normal. And we're in different places in the world. And the person who created my instrument was a person who used psychedelics and meditated and stuff, Steve Jobs. That creative power is working. Now, whether we'll blow ourselves up or kill ourselves first, who knows? But I was in Oregon. I had this incredible vision in Oregon whenever I was out there. And then when I came back, I tried to create a course and teach it. It was just, you couldn't put it in it was putting it in language, sacrificed most of it. You know, it was ridiculous trying to teach it, but I tried. But to, in martial arts and yoga and meditation, to go to the next level, there has to be a breakdown and restructuring. So people who are training their bodies know you reach a certain level of capacity, and then the body will seem like it's getting worse or hurt or damaged because it's breaking down and restructuring. And after that process happens, you have much more capacity. And same thing with the brain and meditating. You can't remember your own name, and you can't think, and you can't talk. And it feels like you're losing your capacities, but the brain's restructuring to take on more Shakti. And so I think that's happening. And I think there right now, in proportion to population, there are more people meditating on Earth than there ever have been in history. And I think the human race, I suspect very deeply, the human race is evolving.
So what advice do you have for people that are having these spontaneous awakenings and they don't have the luxury that we had of having a guru, but maybe they're listening to us now?
That's really tricky because there are a lot of people out there teaching who don't have a clue what they're doing. But I think finding people like Bonnie Greenwell, who does know, can give good solid advice, and really using that inner compass when, you know, people watch YouTube videos and all sorts of stuff, and really people want to develop a sense of whether the people they're connecting with are authentic and are coming out of compassion. And that's not always so easy to do.
What was the vision you had in Oregon that you wanted to teach people? I'm just curious about that.
We were in Oregon with friends, and I really hadn't meditated or practiced for a few days. And so Bonnie went out with her friends, and I spent the afternoon doing hatha yoga and meditating. That wasn't what happened. And then everybody came home, everything was fine, and we went to bed that night, and the universe opened up, and I just had this vision of the possibility. It was a dynamic vision, like watching a multi-dimensional movie. The human beings actually become sane and start cooperating together and working together, and we could really, with technology is an extension of our nervous system, we could really create a world not only on Earth but other places where we're living in a phenomenal experience of life. And even now, with what we're doing now, there are many people who will be able to choose how long they want their physical body to live, because that technology with stem cell and all sorts of other things is already becoming available.
So what was it that you were trying to teach? That experience that you had?
I was trying to break it down, and when I taught it, the experience of it was much greater than what I could say. It's like, the usual stuff we all know is be positive, be optimistic. Your energy fields affect everything around you. Optimists see possibilities for other people, see obstacle, and it sounded like a bunch of new age stuff, which I guess it was, but the experience of it was so much more dynamic than what I could say in words. It was like, oh my God, I felt like shitting myself after every class. But I guess when the Kundalini starts moving, you feel it much more.
Mm-hmm.
So when I put it in words, it was just so limited and stuff.
So that's the question. Can that experience be had through words? And I suppose it can if it comes from an awakened being, or does it just need to be experienced through the actual experience of having the awakening?
I think the trouble with words and thinking is we think we know something when we don't. So somebody, like, I have friends who are very astute philosophers, and they come up with arguments about things which are very satisfying to their intellect. In fact, without being too critical, they have no idea what they're talking about. Even people talking about Kundalini, it's like the more they talk about it and criticize it, the clearer it is. They have it's like a pre-adolescent child talking about romantic love and sex and infatuation, and they may know the words and be saying all this stuff, but you're totally clear they have no idea what they're talking about because they got it, but they don't.
I feel like that.
I do think Kundalini is what's going to launch people.
I wanted to ask you on that, because the way that I feel like you can always check when you're in your own process and you're philosophizing and imagining and projecting and whatever. There's the body, and I noticed that you must be 70 years old if you were 15 in 1964. 71.
71, yeah.
Yeah, I was born in 65, so I know the day. And
you're a mere child.
Yeah, but you look so robust, and when you started talking about the over-intellectualization, what occurred to me was, and you alluded to martial arts and hatha yoga, so I wanted to hear about your journey from a physical perspective, from the hatha yoga or the martial arts. And it's a term that's used in embodied philosophy, but in my own experiments, in my own sadhana, I really see the genius of that term, where it's like my meditative experiences, are, and Bruce Lee writes about this also. So your meditative experiences or your philosophy can be expressed through the physical body and a physical practice. So one example, just so we're on the same page, is I'll go to the yoga mat in a gym and just sit there, or even just lay down and just see what arises. Now, my another part says, oh, you should get up and do some push-ups or whatever. And then another part says, no, just relax and see what arises. And so, I play that game in the physical body at the yoga studio or on my mat or at the gym, or going for a run, walk. I'll walk for a bit, and then the Kundalini will tell me to sprint, and then I'll walk again. Then I'll walk at a slow pace. It's like that. So I'm constantly, like, let's say, implementing the philosophy through the body. And I think you must have experienced something similar.
Yeah. In the Shivananda training, they said the body is the temple of God. I've had teachers who say the body is a piece of meat. But the fact is, every cell in our body is more intelligent than our intellect is. It can do things we have no idea. Every cell is Shakti. Every cell is vibrating with consciousness. And the body is a gift. We're like transmitting stations, and it's an incredible gift. And it's an instrument. And we're using such a small capacity of the human body. And one of the things about martial arts, I hate violence, but the martial arts show, if you're going to be a successful martial artist, that the body responds faster than the mind. It's a Zen state. If you're sitting around waiting to figure out how to block a guy with a knife, you're dead. And the body is moving intelligently and spontaneously, while the mind's sort of sitting there going, what's happening now? and so the body is amazing. And I, when I meditate, kriyas happen, but I also, as you, am habituated to a practice that's always changing, but I created it based on Qigong, martial arts, Hatha yoga, traditional Hatha yoga. And I think it really keeps the instrument strong. So when meditation happens, it's not overwhelming.
Can you talk a little bit about that practice? Like,
so the body's not just a piece of meat.
No, it's living, it's God.
Yeah, it's interesting because
it's God, exactly. Yeah.
It seems that those two perspectives can coexist, though.
That it's a piece of meat and it's God?
Yes.
Well, I think it's too long been taught that it's just meat, and we haven't honored the embodiment. And I think because there's so much Kundalini awakening happening now, I think it's important to be embodied as the God, as the divine, as the Shakti itself. And I think this is a new phase of evolution. That's just my opinion.
I think the thing is, though, not to get, even though we're embodied and we embrace the body and we embrace the divinity of the body, there will be a point when we need to drop the body, and even in meditation we need to drop the body. So the two perspectives can intermix.
Right. And that's the paradox of trying to talk about all of this.
Right.
But you're right, we're going to have plenty of time without the body when it dies. And you're right, also in samadhi, there is, you couldn't find a body if you had to. But the body's the launching ground for that.
Mm-hmm. Here, yes, right.
But is there something different happening now? It seems like there's a shift in the frequency where the body's not just the body, it's a higher vibrational field. And it has, but something's going on here is what I'm saying. Yeah. It's not just the same old thing.
So I tell my students that they're all avatars of light, and they're constantly feeding the field, and the body is an energy field. And when we go out, we're affecting everybody around us. And what's interesting is little children and animals tend to notice that more than adults, because many adults are too self-absorbed. But we're feeding the field all the time, and the body is an energy system. I mean, we use the word matter still, but matter was seen through over 100 years ago.
That's why I love reading the teachings of Dhyan Yogi and Baba, because they really get into the scientific aspect of the body and the Kundalini and the prana and the energy systems.
Yeah. Guruji is just incredible, the amount of stuff he knew.
He even had himself tested, didn't he? Scientifically, didn't he have his brain tested?
Yeah. So we were living in a little apartment. He called me late one night, and he was on the West Coast, and he was laughing so hard because they were doing tests, and he was talking mainly about blood pressure, and they said it was way, way too high. He said, you're old, you're going to have a stroke. It's way too high. And he goes, take it again. And then they couldn't even find it. And so he was one of the yogis, like many, like Swami Rama and some others, who could control functions within the body that medical science said you can't control. But he could control his blood pressure. There's a samadhi, and I've actually taken people into this in hospitals in front of medical staff, where your pulse and your breath become imperceptible. And the Shakti, we can learn to, it's not really we're controlling, but these things can be controlled. It's really amazing. There was a woman, she's a disciple of Guruji's, and she would go into a form of samadhi where her body, she's in Connecticut, her body would become very rigid and cold, and her breath would stop, and there's no perceivable pulse. And her husband kept worrying that she was dead. But Guruji said, and I continued to tell people, just touch the top of her head, and if it's hot, don't worry, she's in samadhi. And the prana's all there, and it'll come back down. But she would just go.
That would be a bit alarming.
Yeah. But
Speaking of alarming, I remember, Tom, in your
prana goes up there, it looks like you're dead.
You had the, I call it the Shanti experience, but you had the experience of this great falling away that Shanti discusses. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your experience with that, and also how it relates to Kundalini, because when I haven't had that experience myself, and when I hear people who have had that experience talk about it, there's nothing I can grab onto. Maybe that's the point, in relating to my own experience with the Shakti. So what led you to that? What happened? How does it exist today?
I think part of it was my purpose in all this was not to become a Hindu or affiliated with cultural affectations and stuff. And I was realizing, I was getting to a point where I was realizing I was going to leave a lot of my teachers and teachings behind, because that wasn't what I was interested in. And at a certain point, everything disappeared. Everything, when you're not propping it up, when you're not thinking about it, when you're not giving it life, it all disappeared. And there was a vast emptiness, and in that level, which I now call a half-baked point, or the ghost cave, there's absolute freedom, but there's no freedom to be anything. How are we doing? Is this making sense?
Absolutely.
So there's nothing happening, and there's absolute freedom, and there's no urge to do anything. And that was an incredible place to be. But from my point of view now, it's half-baked. It's the ghost cave. So Philip K. Dick said, reality is that when you stop believing in it, is still here. So nothing was happening, but the Kundalini was happening. I wasn't doing that. She was doing me. She was authoring me. She was either authoring that pure freedom. She was that freedom. And so the Tom character disappeared, everything disappeared, but then it came back because the Shakti reemerged. And in that, I realized that everything is it, everything. And there's no problem. It's some people call me what do you call Neo-Advaita, but what that's really saying is all there is God, or all there is Shakti. You can't escape what is, and that brought me back. And a lot of it is my work is serving people, of all sorts of problems. They don't want to just wake up. They want to have a better relationship, or they're scared, they're sick, whatever it is. And this reemergence brought me back so I could help people, whatever their issue was. So it's like Hote returning to the marketplace. It's all inclusive. I don't like the word non-dual, because it's all inclusive, includes everything, includes what we like, includes what we don't like, includes everything. And that's what happened out of that emptiness. Everything reemerged.
That to me just seems like such an obvious result of the Kundalini awakening. How is that? Because you said it wasn't aligned with the teachings of the ashram. I don't understand how that's not aligned with the teachings when that should be a result of the.
I wasn't interested in becoming an Indian or a Hindu.
Okay, so.
And they have a lot of myths and stories and things that are just, that's not where I was drawn to go. I knew all that and I taught it.
Without the
But
personality.
I didn't feel for me, I'm not talking about others, for me, it was authentic.
Mm-hmm.
Without the personality and without the body, is it just only Shakti or is there something else?
Well, functioning continued to happen.
As the
saying, Tim, you had
I was just saying, like, that is a nice bridge to the symbol over Tom's head for this entire conversation. So it seems like, yeah, it's totally aligned with what you're saying now, is that the falling away led you into a more Taoist state, where the Tao is Shakti, basically.
Yeah, and some of the yoga, the way I teach is Taoist based. The ascending and descending, and I work more with the three dantians than the chakras and stuff. But yeah, the vast emptiness. This is the vast emptiness. Let me tell you a story about Muktananda. What happened when I first went to him? Go ahead. What did you wanted to say something?
No. He said this is the vast emptiness. I was just absorbing that. But no,
this Shiva and Shakti are the same thing.
Yes, and that seems like such an obvious result of the Kundalini awakening to me.
Right. But I didn't need all the paraphernalia and other stuff for me that went with it.
So if someone like an awakened guru still has all of that adorning them, is that just a personality? What is that?
I think they're coming out of a culture where that serves them. I understand. I've even taught the Ramayana. I think that's a very useful story when it's understood correctly, because Ram was an avatar and yet he had all these freaking problems like we all do. Mm-hmm. But for me, I was trying to meet Westerners where they're at.
Yes.
But let me tell you about Muktananda.
Yes.
So when I first met Muktananda, I was still involved in Zen. I was working with Shunyata koans of emptiness. So emptiness, or Shunyata, in some schools of Buddhism are considered what is. So Muktananda, I think it was one of the first times I met him, he's up there bopping people with peacock feathers and he's jabbering with people and he's just all these people. And I said I had a question for him. And so they made me stand to the side until they got his attention. And I told him I was studying Zen koans, and I said, is Shunyata the highest state? And he said, no. And I'm like, okay, well, what is the highest state? He said, the knower of Shunyata. And right there, I had a bigger satori with Muktananda than I ever had with my Zen teachers. Is everything's appearing and disappearing within that awareness, even Shunyata. How do we know that pure emptiness exists? Because it rises within the knower. So that was
great.
Yeah, that's perfect.
So, but do you feel you transmit Shakti? I mean, if you were sitting in front of someone, they, have a Kundalini activation, maybe, perhaps, or not?
A lot of people who come to satsang have activations. Other than the Hong So mantra, which I often give, and there's the Kundalini Kriya breath and all that. Other than that, the Shakti gives Shaktipat, but it tends to use a transmitter. And so some people, if you're in satsang with people, some people are very aware of what's going on, and other people have no idea. Somebody will say, wow, the Shakti was so intense today. And they go, what are you talking about? So everybody has a different experience. And I don't, unless somebody has a question, I don't talk about it that much, because what happens is people get competitive with their kriyas and stuff, and it's like, there's another story of Muktananda I got to share. One night he comes out, this is what hundreds of people, he comes out and he says, when the Kundalini is awakened, it goes through the 72,000 nadis. It purifies all the channels and all the levels, and people have kriyas, and they have all these phenomena happen. And it's a sign that Kundalini is awakened and emerging. So that night we meditate, and it sounded like a freaking zoo. Everybody's having kriyas and moving around and barking and pranayama and everything. And it was great. Next night, Muktananda comes on and goes, but the highest beings like Buddha and Jesus didn't have kriyas, because they're pure and they're open. And so they never talked about kriyas because they didn't have any blockages. That night in meditation, we're all like, that made me suspicious.
Well, so is it suspicious because the egos were taking over, or was it Muktananda that was giving people each experience?
Both.
I say
because
it's more
kriyas happen.
though.
Kriyas happen, but I think kriyas happen. We don't do them.
Well, I personally am getting all kinds of Shakti right now from you. Like zing.
No, I think Muktananda is very clever in the way he did things like
energy,
that.
I just feel a lot of peace hearing you talk. It's not for me, an activated Kundalini. It's a dropping in silence sort of place. I feel,
Silence is good.
Thank
you. Are you still in contact with Muktananda, like in more astral fields, or do you consider yourself to have any non-corporal guides?
Well, I feel Kundalini is my guide. And I go through stages of Bhav with Muktananda, Guruji, and Andima. I can get very, Nandima is still alive. I feel very connected with her, even though we don't see each other. And I can get, feel a lot of love there. But I think Muktananda's transmission was the Shakti's, the Guru. So yeah, I still wake up some days and go, oh, that's what he was talking about. I think Muktananda, there are 4 upayas, different levels of teaching, and he taught from all of them, but he, no doubt, was constantly saying all there is God. That's all there is. All there is Shakti, whatever you want to call it. And you are that. You are that. You don't have to do anything to become that. You are that.
I have to go soon, but this question just came to me because I've observed it, where people have the Shakti coming through them and their ego is totally taking credit for it. And and I feel like saying, you don't know what, and they don't know what they're talking about, but they're giving Shakti. So there's this split. And what do you tell those people?
Well, I think the Shakti will take care of it eventually. But I think, again, even those people they're serving the Shaktis, they're Shakti too. So it's hard to understand why they're teachers that are not helpful and even dangerous. And I think people
Right.
have to really question, not only what is the teacher up to, but what are we as students up to? Because people come to teachers, they want CDs. CDs will happen, but they won't be that interesting necessarily. And so people go to teachers with these hidden agendas. And I think the teachers that aren't authentic are feeding those agendas. And so it's they're got something going on. But to me, it's all the play. Even the false teachers are part of it.
Right.
It's like also the false teacher syndrome helps us know when we discover a really true teacher because of the contrast. And you need the inauthentic teacher to really, fine tune your sensibility. And it's not about the teacher, of course. It's about recognizing the stronger, more authentic flow of Shakti without an ego filter that's manipulating things. So, and then you can apply that back to your own process. So it doesn't, whole false teacher syndrome actually sharpens your own inner teacher and potential to be a false teacher internally.
The teacher, all you have to do is be honest. And I think one of the things I tell everybody who comes to satsang is you really, really want to know what you want. What are you there for? What is it you really, really want? And there's no right answer, but it will help you get the right teacher.
Right. If you really have that deep, honest longing within yourself.
Right.
Right. That's what you're attracting, hopefully. Do you have any, Alan, like Alan said, he has to go in a few minutes. What?
No, I said, this has been great. It's been, I can feel matured Shakti. It's like matured wine, it's just, it's been, but it's great because you're showing an evolution. I mean, it's your particular, path, but, I appreciate you being so dedicated and being such a student of it. Thank you for sharing.
Well, thank you, Alan. It's great to meet you, and glad we were able to be together.
Yeah. So, but what do you want to do, Kai? Are you gonna keep going for a little bit?
No, we'll go. I just didn't know if Tom had anything he wanted to just say in closing.
Mine's a blank.
Okay, well,
I do think I think one of the things to really look at is if we are truly waking up, the measure of that is you're kind to other people, animals, plants, and yourself. That kindness is really, from my point of view, the only true measure of somebody who's waking up.
Great.
And I don't care how smart they are, how much bullshit they have. You see that kindness.
Yeah, and Dhyan Yogi was apparently a living example of that.
Yes. Yeah, and so is Anandima. Anandima is very kind, very good.
Thank you, Tom.
How can people find you, Tom? How can people contact you or find your website? Your website is.
You posted that, Kai, didn't you?
But you can say it. There's
the Awakened Heart Center. The Awakened Heart Center, and that has information. And there's also a link where I give satsang is through the Yoga Garden, and I meet with people privately, and all the blog is there. All the essays I've written over many years are there, including a number of them on Kundalini, the Hamsa mantra, how to practice it.
So it's
the Awakened Heart Center for Conscious Living.
And it's awakenedheartcenter.com. Is that what it is? What's the address?
Yeah, The Awakened Heart Center. Got to put the in there. The Awakened Heart Center.
.com, and it's in on a link on my channel in the description. So thank you so much, Tom. It's
Right.
been a really
Thank you all.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Kai. It's been great.
and great. Thank you. Love you all.
Would you?
I love you all. Yes.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Tim, Kai,
Emma.
Tom.
Gemma.
Jeremiah.